National Nancy's, the fourth in the Alex Reynolds Mysteries. Author Fred Hunter, St. Martin's Press, New York, 2000. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 7. Friday, we arrived at the Wabash headquarters to find that Clark's offices had expanded into an additional suite. One full room was devoted to long folding tables at which the continuing preparations for the mailing were being boisterously performed. In the main room, the bank of phones was still set up haphazardly on a row of tables, but the row had been lengthened and additional phones put in. Apparently, Clark's campaign was looking more viable by the minute as the primary approached, and that was partly due to the bombing. Peter took his place at the phones, and I went into stuffing central. The number of volunteers had tripled in the past 3 days. Joe Gardner was at the center of a table by the window, staring at the tabletop while he worked steadily. I had a feeling his dour expression was due to the fact that he'd had the misfortune to find himself seated directly across from Mickey Downs, who was chattering away at him, oblivious to his audience's reaction. Richard Birch and Annie Watson, the only two people Peter had been able to question at all, were both there, apparently taking a breather from the phones. At first, those were the only four people I recognized, but then I saw Sheila and Joe, the friends who had gotten us involved in the campaign to begin with. She was working at the far end of one of the tables at the inner corner of the room. I went over to her. "Hi," she said, flipping her bangs out of her eyes. She didn't miss a beat in stuffing, which she was doing with alarming alacrity. "Where's Peter?" "In the other room on the phones." "How about Joe?" "She's at the shop. The place would fall apart without her. I thought I'd put in some time here this morning, even if I was supposed to be at the restaurant. People can slop food on the tables without me." She tossed a handful of stuffed envelopes into a box and pulled forward another pile of supplies. "Pretty scary about Jody, isn't it?" "Yeah," I replied. I knelt beside her and said quietly, "Hey, Sheila, Jody was a friend of yours, wasn't she?" "Yeah." "Did she ever say anything to you about Fritz Peterson?" She stopped with a flyer halfway into an envelope. "The Republican? Of course she did. I can't repeat what she said. I'm too much of a lady." I smiled. "No, I'm not talking about name-calling. I'm talking about... I'm not sure. I know what I'm talking about. Did she ever say anything about Peterson being involved in some sort of scandal?" She resumed her work with a laugh. "Of course not." I drew back slightly. "Why do you say that?" "If Jody knew anything about a scandal, she wouldn't have told me. She would have told the whole world, and you wouldn't have to ask. She hated Peterson, you know." "I know. If she'd caught him up in anything, she would have gone straight to the media." "Not if she didn't have anything solid yet," I said absently. Sheila paused again and eyed me. "Say, what is this?" "Huh?" "Oh, nothing," I said quickly, trying to cover my lapse. "I was just curious. What with her getting killed, it's the Jessica Fletcher in me. I don't like unsolved riddles." She looked at me for a moment, then said in a pointed whisper, "Don't make waves, Alex." "What?" "Don't make waves. It's bad enough the police are doing it. Don't you do it too." "What are you saying? That you don't want anyone to find out who killed Jody?" "Of course I do, but not at the expense of everything else." I stared at her in disbelief. "I don't know what you mean." She leaned in closer and whispered intensely, "Whoever bombed the office must have some pretty big grievances against Clark. The primary's only a few days away. We don't need that getting aired right now. Clark is the best candidate we've had in a long time. We need to get him elected." "You don't think Clark had anything to do with this?" I asked after a beat. "Of course not. But no matter what, that place was bombed. When the truth comes out, it'll cast a pall over the election and hurt Clark's chances. The public is full of morons. They won't know the facts. They'll just remember that something terrible happened in connection with Clark and hold it against him. That's not the way it is now. People seem to be supporting him because of this attack." Her lips tightened. "That'll change the minute they find out what the attack was about. Don't screw things up, Alex. We need to get Clark elected." no matter what the cost. Sheila averted her eyes in a way that was uncharacteristically evasive. Jody's dead. Nothing's going to bring her back. I rose slowly. I'd better get to work. I walked away from her, still unable to believe what I'd been hearing. I knew that Clark had generated an almost fanatical following in parts of the community, but I didn't know that it would translate into a callous disregard for the death of one of the community's own members. And at the same time, I couldn't entirely disagree with Sheila's assessment of the situation. Finding the killer might turn in the bombing from an anonymous act of terrorism into a platform for airing grievances against Clark. And at this stage of the game, that would probably hurt his chances in the primary. But unlike Sheila, I still thought the truth was more important than who got elected. I was trying to find a place to work with John Schuler popped out of his office, once again carrying a notepad to which he referred continually as he spoke. People, he announced. Can I have your attention for a moment? First of all, I want to thank you all once again for all the hard work you're doing. He paused to smile. Future Senator Charlie Clark, and I greatly appreciate your service. Now, as you know, the primary's on Tuesday. We're looking to have a great turnout and a great day. He paused for applause, which he got once people realized why he had stopped. Now, we'll be holding a primary day rally. I don't want to be premature by calling it a victory party. He paused again, and his smile became sly. At the grand ballroom in the Piedmont Hotel. There was a collective ooh from the volunteers, as much for the semi-plush Piedmont as for the implied victory. Schuler looked back down at his notes, then continued, We would like each and every one of you to be there. A good showing is essential because we're sure there will be lots of news cameras there to cover the big night. So let's have a great big turnout for them. I swear to God, I heard a couple of people say, Yay! As a healthier round of applause broke out. Thank you all, and keep up the good work, Schuler said with a wave as he started back toward his office. He paused for just a second and added, and don't forget the fundraiser tonight. With this, he disappeared into his office. This time, he hadn't even mentioned Tony Milano's name. I gave another inward sigh and was just about to get to work when an idea came to me. I went over to Peter, who was just finishing up with somebody on the phone. Yes, he said patiently. I'll pass your recommendations along to Mr. Clark. He replaced the receiver. You will? Oh, of course I will, he said with a crooked smile. That was a man who thought people should have their religious affiliation tattooed on their upper left arms. I laughed as I crouched beside him for a whispered tete-a-tete. Honey, I have an idea, but I don't think you're going to like it. His eyebrows went up. You don't think I'm going to like it? Then I think I'm going to hate it. I think we should ask Schuler about the tape. What? Peter exclaimed. We both glanced from side to side to see if we'd drawn anyone's attention. It didn't look like we had. Your mother said. I know what she said, and she's probably right, but if I've already gotten us in danger, then we might as well pursue it. It's not going to disappear on its own. He eyed me wearily. It scares me that makes sense to me. But why Schuler? Because I don't think we're going to get anywhere just asking around about it. I think we should go to the source. The source. Peter's voice raised for a second, but lowered quickly. What makes you think he's the source? Not the source of the tape, I said, but if there really is dirt on Fritz Peterson and someone in this organization was trying to get it, don't you think Schuler would know about it? Here's what I think we should do. Peter pursed his lips while I explained. He didn't look pleased, but he didn't object. Let's go, he said, rising from the table as his phone started to ring. We crossed the room, and I was just about to knock on Schuler's door when Sean Stillman appeared out of nowhere and interposed himself between us and our objective. What are you doing? He exclaimed with an expression of utter astonishment on his face. We need to talk to Schuler, I said. You can't do that. He's very busy. Anything you think you need to talk to him about should go through me. If John really needs to know about it, I'll pass it on. This was all we needed. To have our investigation sidelined by an office despot. I had a feeling I was getting a little taste of what it's like for agents when they have to go undercover as maids and waiters. Sean, we really need to talk to him, I said again, unable to think of another way to put it. What's it about? He asked. I'll decide if it needs to get passed on. I could feel myself getting red in the face, Peter said quickly. It's personal, and believe me, Schuler will be very upset with you if this is kept from him. Sean looked at him uncertainly. Peter always seems to know how to deal with people, and he shares my mother's propensity for coming up with a plausible lie on the spur of the moment. It appeared that the best way to get around Sean was to make him believe he was going to get in trouble with his boss. Well, okay, he said reluctantly. Wait, I'll see if he can see you. He awkwardly twisted the doorknob without turning around, as if he was afraid we'd club him on the head and storm into the office over his prostrate body if he turned his back to us. Once he got the door open, he performed a play-seat, pirouette into the office, closing the door behind him. Peter looked at me and said, "Petty tyrant syndrome. It can happen to the best of us." It may be more than that. Maybe Mickey Downs was right about how badly he wanted the job. In a matter of seconds, Sean reopened the door in a perfectly professional manner and said, "Mr. Schuler can see you now." He stepped aside to let us through, then left, closing the door behind him. The office was small but private. The walls were the same bilious color as the hallway, and there were cheap prints of wading storks hanging on the walls. The prints had to have come with the place. Schuler was seated behind a desk that looked like it hadn't been moved for at least 50 years. The top was thick with varnish that accentuated the dents and scratches of all the previous owners. Schuler was busy listening to someone on the phone while tapping his teeth with the eraser of a pencil that had chew marks all over it. It was a few moments before he acknowledged our presence. He waved the pencil like a magic wand at the two plastic chairs facing his desk. We took this as our cue to sit. He then reproduced the blank look people use when they're on the phone in front of guests and want to pretend they're alone. "Uh-huh," he said into the receiver. He repeated this a few times and said, "Yes, we'll see you there." He hung up the phone, laid the pencil down, and folded his hands atop the desk. "Mr. Stillman said that you needed to see me on a personal matter? That's interesting. I don't know you, even though I've seen you in the office." When he spoke, his head swiveled back and forth between us like an animatronic owl. He was trying so hard to appear competent that I almost regretted the fact that he wasn't pulling it off. "Yes, well, there's a rumor going around the office, and it's something that Peter and I find really disturbing. Isn't that right, Peter?" "That's right. A rumor," said Schuler. "You see, we decided to volunteer for the Clark campaign because we really believe in what he stands for, especially because he isn't afraid to speak his mind and let the chips fall where they may." "Mm-hmm," said Schuler slowly in a tone that implied I should get to the point. "What is the rumor?" "That the Clark campaign is trying to dig up dirt on Fritz Peterson." I tried to sound as naive as possible. After all, so far as we knew, I was the one who had started the rumor. "You see, we got involved with this volunteering stuff because we believe that Clark is running an honest campaign and that there wasn't going to be any mudslinging." Schuler continued to stare at me across the desk with his hands folded in front of him. When he didn't say anything immediately, I added, It's the idea that Clark might be looking for dirt that we find disturbing." "It should be," he said, drawing back in his chair like a guest on a Barbara Walters special. "And let me set your mind at ease. There is absolutely no truth to the rumor. Charlie Clark is running a clean campaign. No mud. We're not even interested in it. I'm sure that you've seen Charlie interviewed on television. He sticks to the issues. He rarely mentions his appointed at all. He wants people to know why he's the best man for the job of state senator, not why the other guys aren't." Not only had we seen Clark on television numerous times, we'd heard him use that very phrase almost every time. He presented it like a badge of honor, as well it might be, except that every time he said it, I pictured a group of crooked politicians in a smoke-filled room trying to come up with the perfect slogan. "Isn't that position going to be a little hard to maintain?" said Peter. "If he wins the primary, his Republican opponent is bound to start slinging mud." "First of all, there is no mud to sling at Charlie. He has a clean record. And nobody has a totally clean slate." Schuler answered that with a smile. "Secondly, just because one candidate slings mud, that doesn't mean the other one has to." "Tell that to Michael Dukakis," Peter said wryly. "Will that be all, gentlemen?" Schuler said, attempting a professional smile as he half rose from his seat. "I hope I have allayed your fears." Neither Peter nor I moved. "Are you sure nobody here's been trying to dig up dirt?" I asked. "Of course I am. Why?" "Because it's all over the place that somebody's been trying to find a tape." Schuler lowered himself back onto his chair. Although he was making a good show of keeping himself composed, he couldn't stop some of the color from draining from his face. Tape? What tape? A videotape, I think, I said innocently. It has some sort of incriminating evidence on it. Where'd you hear a thing like that? Just around here, I said. Some of the volunteers have been talking about it. They think that was why Jody Lynn Hayden was in the Lincoln office when it blew up. What? They're saying she was trying to get some evidence? There was a long silence during which Schuler stared at me straight in the eye, then suddenly said, Well, I suppose it's possible that Miss Lynn Hayden was trying to do that. But if she was acting alone. After all, we have no control over what a private citizen is doing on her own time. And if one of our people was trying to dig up dirt, that doesn't mean it was sanctioned by this office. Maybe it was because I know that the campaign had answers prepared for every possible topic, and that I doubted his sincerity. His response was a little too ready to his lips, as Mother would say. I had a feeling that he had known what Jody was doing, and would never admit it now for fear of being held culpable in her death. Okay, well, I feel much better about this all then, I said, and Peter and I rose. So do I, said Peter. He sounded awfully grave. Oh, one thing, I said. You don't know anything about a tape, do you? I mean, if it really exists. He narrowed his eyes at me. There was a very long pause. As I just told you, we're not interested in dirt. When we came out of the office, we found Sean waiting by the door. Well, he said, was John as happy to see you as you thought he'd be? Look, Sean, I started, but he cut me off. Forget it. Get back to work. He marched away, but didn't completely forget himself. He added a weak, please, over his shoulder. Do you believe that guy? I said. Peter shrugged. We all want to control our own little piece of the world. Huh? No, I mean Schuler, I said as we walked back to Peter's place at the phones. He sighed. I'd like to believe that Clark isn't interested in dirt, but it's a little hard to buy. He can't be that naive. First of all, he can't be that clean. Everybody has something in their past that can be held against them. Really? I said as he took his seat. Do you? He gave me a coy smile. Well, there was that 6 weeks with the dwarf. A dwarf, huh? Was everything in proportion? The point is, he said as he laughed, politicians can make even relatively innocent things look bad. Even trying marijuana once, and secondly, if Fritz Peterson starts hammering away at Clark, Clark is going to have to start swinging back sometime, or he's going to tank. I don't know about you, but I got the feeling that Schuler knew what Jody was doing. He nodded. Did you notice that quickly he pulled out the if she was doing it, she was acting on her own defense? Yeah. We heard her door open and looked up. Schuler emerged from his office and made a beeline for Clark's office. He opened the door without knocking and went in. I wonder what this is about, I said. It could be anything. He goes in there all the time, said Peter once again, being the voice of reason. Or it could be that we lit a fire under him. There was yet another note from Mother waiting for us when we got home late that afternoon, and I was beginning to feel like her pen pal. This one said that she was going shopping, then meeting Simon for dinner. We decided to order in Chinese food, which we ate while watching the news on the tiny television on the kitchen counter. There were reports on all the senatorial candidates' activities as the primary approached, and another brief mention of the lack of developments in the bombing investigations. She's telling us, I said with a nod at the female news anchor. Peter popped a crispy wonton into his mouth, chewed on it for a little bit, then said, We're still going to Tony's tonight, right? Of course. It'll be the social situation, more social than at the office. And Tony knows a lot of people. Maybe we'll be able to pick up something there. He grinned. I wonder who'll be there. My mouth dropped open slightly. What do you mean? You don't think it'll be his clients, do you? He raised his eyebrows. Who else does Tony know with money? A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold. To offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides. and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.